has been studied extensively now by several of us here and many people in the world. So we know that there are several traits involved in honeybee resistance or tolerance, because there are two different things. And possibly, I mean, we can breed for one trait in particular, but when we look at populations that survive naturally and we try to dig into them in a bit more details and we look at why they manage to survive despite having mites without treatment, we usually find several reasons identified for this. So there is the ability of bees to detect the presence of mites within the hive, and so they will clean these areas. So this can be through grooming, for instance, when they detect it on adult bees and they do it themselves or to other nestmates in the colonies. And then another behavior called hygienic behavior, in a general sense, they will detect that the mites are in the brood. So as you know, the mite reproduces in the brood, so they will detect that something is wrong there and clean the content of the cell. And as a result, these mites will not produce offspring, so there will be less mites produced in the colonies, and so the mite population will be reduced as a result. Another mechanism also that is a bit less characterized, but we know exists, is the ability of the brood itself to disrupt the reproduction of the mite within the brood cell. And the result is the same, that the mite population growth will be reduced. And then there are other aspects more linked to at the colony level. For instance, we know that when bees swarm, that will also affect the mite population, and overall the population dynamic within the colony and the dynamic of the brood and of the bee inside the colony will also affect the dynamic of the mite, because it relies on the brood to reproduce.
We have follow-up questions. So, how did you find those bees to do that work on, to find those traits?
And spreading to the next bee. So if colonies were swarming more, then the mite would perhaps be less virulent and adapt to be less harmful for the colonies. But they didn't swarm more because the mite was too dangerous and killed 80, 85, 90% of the colonies, and a few survived. And then we started to examine how they're surviving, and we saw that it was very clearly a trait of the honeybees. Even when we moved bee queens from this population, they still were able to reduce the mite population growth. And we found that when we looked closer, the mites were not reproducing in these colonies. So that was like the big thing, that they're not reproducing, which is not weird. We've also seen that in other populations in Africa, and that mites don't reproduce as well. But then we started also to try to understand deeper how the bees are able to affect the mite reproduction. And then of course we have all the great work on VSH that Fanny has done, and I think that the bottom line is that we see there's a reduced reproduction, and that's I think a key trait that we see in a lot of populations is this low mite reproduction. But even though also Fanny mentioned that you have this very specific trait at the individual bee level, but as a colony, it doesn't always mean that you have these super resistant colonies, because they can still have quite high mite infestation, even though they're able to reproduce or to reduce the mite reproduction.
We have tried to use non-mite reproduction as a trait, but the thing is how do we incorporate this in a schedule of reading, in a reading program? Sometimes, and a lot of times, we discuss about this, and I say to myself, why not just select for honey production? A colony that produces honey is a good colony.
I think there's certainly potential there. I mean, I have been involved in marker projects, and sometimes the repeatability of success using a marker panel you've developed is not always as great as you might have hoped. I think with the advancement of genetic techniques, I think there is certainly potential to do that. I think genomic tools are going to play a role in the future, but I think we have to think carefully about how they can be incorporated to develop stock for the industry.
Remove the beekeepers from the problem. And just let their bees go. They've all now, after a period of time, got resistance developed. And we see the same traits, those that Fanny already mentioned. The bees' ability to detect the infested cells, remove a high proportion of these, and increasing the infertility of the mite to the left. So it's not, and it's nothing to do with the type of bee. It's Carnica, Buckfast, Mellifera, whatever. It's the bees themselves that could do that. We just need, beekeepers need to help them transition from one to the other. They need a bit of help from us because the way that we manage them, but they have the solution. So we really need to learn from the bees and not the other way around.
So we've tried to understand from following the research from some of the greats that I'm sharing a table with here, and also from the work that USDA did, led by particularly Dr. John Harbaugh, and just to understand what the traits were that are naturally surviving bees. And then we tried to work out how we could observe these traits. And so I think if you go back to what nature is doing, you have a long-term sustainable solution. And so we look for things like uncapping at the pink to purple-eyed stage, which you tend to see in clusters, and which is the search phase. You typically see the antennae and bits of the proboscis and thorax, not often abdomens, but you could actually see that this chewing out process was going on. We could see the follow-through. Well, we're not letting things go, actually, Per. So the monitoring will tell you which bees have the ability with Roa and which ones do not. And so, very simply, you're going to breed from those with the lower mite counts where you're seeing the traits which you're monitoring for, and you're going to requeen the rest.
From my experience, and I'm not a geneticist, and I haven't been around in Africa and seeing all these other populations, and I haven't really tried it myself to do this kind of selection experiments. But I just want to note that from what we see in our population that's not being treated, they have really high mite infestation pressure. They're not doing well. They're not a colony that I would want to keep because they're very sick. They're very susceptible to other kinds of diseases. They're full of chalk brood, and that's genetic because even when we move the colonies to other countries, they still are highly susceptible to chalk brood. So I think it isn't so easy to just say, stop treating. And I mean, I respect a lot what you're doing, but I don't think it's so easy just to do this. And also the traits that you're describing to characterize, they're really highly complex. And in Sweden, we have super engaged beekeepers, and we've tried to do this on a national level to get beekeepers involved in trying to select and identify and select these traits. And it's so difficult to really select these. Why are we so focused on not treating our bees? Maybe our focus should be having healthy bees. I don't know. I'm throwing this out there for you guys. I think that the treatment-free bees that I work with, they hurt me. They hurt me to see them so sick. And the ones I have at home that I take care of, and they have beautiful brood patterns, and they're gentle, and those are the bees that I like. So I think we also need to think about why we're doing it, what's our responsibilities to bees. They can survive and adapt naturally traits and such, but I mean, a lot of the environmental issues that they face are from beekeepers. Not only just the way we manage bees, but also we introduce these diseases. So.
Just look along the row here. If you look at what happens when Roa first arrives, it does seem that about 10% of Roa naive bees have the innate ability already to cope with Roa mites. So it seems to be out there in all populations and just needs to look, and that's at the start. So in Australia, If we'd had the knowledge we had now, right at the start of the project, we could have done it in 3 years. And if you talk to people, and this is with open mating,
I was working in Africa when the varroa mites arrived. Nobody did anything, and nobody lost bees. They lost bees for other reasons, but not because of varroa mites. I'm sure some colonies were lost, but the bees were reproducing so fast that nobody noticed the loss. So it is, the traits are there, they are just waiting to be picked up. And if we keep on intervening with chemicals, we can sit and wait forever.
I don't think that beekeepers should be spending their time looking at these traits. But I mean, basically, yeah, to really do this well, you need to invest the time and still do a lot of monitoring. And so I think it is, like you said, time consuming to do it. It's possible, but very time consuming. And that, I think, is a difference between just stop treating and they will become resistant and perfect. I think you need to invest a lot of energy and still have a program, but maybe not based on these detailed trait assessments.
SMR testing with one drone in simulated green, so following the Harbour model. And we see some success in this. So it's enormous load of work. It engaged people, so there are beekeepers who like to join such group and they learn, so there is a good experience and they can speed up the selection process. So I'm happy that we have those groups and I think they play a role, but at the end when it comes to the wider field, we need to teach beekeepers that they follow mite infestation levels. This is one of the biggest problems, that most people don't know about the infestation at the moment where they treat. And that has to be changed. So at the end, for the success in the whole population, the infestation levels are the crucial point.
I think the problems the beekeepers are very, very difficult, and most beekeepers, I speak it's for Germany, have not so many colonies. They have a difficult, for example, Canada. The average lies between 6 or 7 colonies per beekeepers. And many beekeepers do it not for honey, they do it for just for fun.
There is someone next to you, Stefan Mandl. You run more than 10,000 colonies.
I have to start at the main problem we had. We worked the whole year a lot, there's a lot of hives. It's really a lot of work, beekeeping. And at the end of the year, so at the end of the season, then it comes the overwintering, and we lost about 15 to 20%. My wife saw this. You lose 20% of 15,000. This is 3,000 hives each winter. This is a huge amount of money. And she told me, I remember this, how is it possible that you are such an old beekeeper, but so a bad beekeeper? And we make 3 times sugar, powder sugar. It's very easy in July, August, and September. And for 3 colonies, it needs only 5 minutes. So and then you know who remains on a low level is the varroa mite. The first few years we didn't see a big change. But now it's really good. So they remain under the limit, under the varroa limit of 2%. So this is our personal limit. So they are not allowed to go up to this 2%. And who remains under this 2% will not be treated. My wife will come today in the evening. Please do not tell her that's easy.
Thank you very much, Eva. So is it really from a commercial point of view interesting for you to go for resistant stock?
Yeah, it's the only way. Who is not going for this in few years will not keep anymore. It's the only way.
And other. And it is very important for us that we have small clubs and they can count the mice and teach the beekeepers. And then we have 4 pillars in our project. The first is breeding, the second is education, the third is biotechnical methods, and the press work is very important, that we must gives the knowledge to the beekeepers. And I think it is very interesting because bee healthy is necessary to have success. We can't say to the farmer, they must reduce. And we put every year new substances in to our hives. It is not good.
We don't see you very well, but maybe can you raise the hand? How many are not treating their bees? Okay, so I think we can say that is a minority. We have many more people who treat their bees regularly. I hope we have provoked some thoughts in you and maybe even some change in your attitude. Because you have heard some success stories on the stage here today.
A clear distinction between people just stopping to treat their bees and letting them be and trying to do treatment-free beekeeping, where you're actually involved in monitoring mites and selecting for low mite infestation and what we think might be resistant colonies. I think there's and you brought this up too with these beekeepers that start beekeeping and after 3 years are gone, and I think it's become quite a trend to just think that natural selection is going to solve the problem on its own and we don't have to do anything. And I don't think that's the case. I think you have to be really, really, really meticulous and monitoring and making an effort and being well-educated beekeepers.
Give me this opportunity again. Per asked a question, how many beekeepers here don't treat? I'm going to ask another question. I'm going to talk to the queen beaters that are here. How many queen beaters here can say that they can sell me a queen that will give me a colony that I do not have to treat anymore? So I want to buy 1,000 queens. Can you give me that? And then I don't have to treat. And you'll be responsible if I lose 80% of my colonies. No, that's the reality that we have.
Yeah, but this...
Are you going to take the risk to say, well, come on, don't treat. Don't treat, that's the way to go. I have 1,500 colonies, and this is what my family lives from. Am I going to do that? No. I understand when you mention, you go to the 2%, we have the 3%, we all try to do that. But when you say that, in my head I say, well, what do you do with the ones that go over 2%? Pardon? Formic acid, so he treats.
It has no sense to hope you can buy resistant queens.
Okay.
So next year, next year, the daughter generation, they will already split up. So if you do not have a breeding program in your company to count the mites and do it yourself, it has absolutely no sense. You will stay on the same level like now. You have to do the work yours.
And so, there's been no co-evolution in the Apis cerana mites. They're happy, they're surviving, they're adapted to live in their drone brood, and their entire life cycle of the varroa mite is basically they live a whole year, the females,